to the edge. Everything bass fishing. Coming to you worldwide from MegaWare Keelguard Studios.
Hey, what's going on, Bass Edge Nation? Man, thanks for joining us, obviously, for another episode of the show. Obviously, want to encourage everybody. As you know, we've gone YouTube. This is our 4th episode on YouTube, so make sure you, whether you're YouTubing or on a regular streaming audio, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us every time for another show. Hopefully an educational show here at Bass Edge Radio. I got to tell you, this is our 400th episode. I can't say, I've been here since 2012, almost, it's 11 plus years, so it's pretty amazing. But in celebration of our 400th episode, we're going to do a giveaway. Lucky for everybody out there, you're going to have an opportunity to win a $125 Midway USA gift card. That's right, you're going to get 5 of these $25 Midway USA gift cards. Man, 125 bones. You can buy some nice stuff with 125 bones, but all you got to do to enter that is to like, comment on this episode, and obviously subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get after it. Get a piece of that $125. Just, I say a piece. One person's going to get this whole piece right here. So it's going to be pretty awesome. First up, I'd like to mention a little post I did on my social media last week, and it was probably one of the best posts I've ever made from a MegaWare standpoint. And I did a highlight on the Scuff Buster. I was showing my boat, my Ranger, pull up onto my trailer, and the Scuff Buster that I have is the Bow Guard XL. It fits perfect there on my Ranger. But it was unreal. 11 hours of watch time on this little 8-second video. It was pretty awesome. I want to make sure that everybody logs into megaware.com. Make sure they check out all of their accessories that are available. Obviously, the one I just mentioned, the Scuff Buster, but some really practical products they have there on the show. Been a partner with Bass Edge for a long time. The first manufacturer of a DIY keel guard, still an industry standard today. Let's go. Breaking down some things going on in the bass fishing world. Just since our last show, May 1st, we've crowned a few more champions. Luke Palmer took it away down at Santee Cooper in the Bassmaster Elite Series. 96 pounds, 14 ounces, won the event by 14 pounds. And that's pretty impressive on that 5-fish limit. We had a really neat Bassmaster Open go on over at Bugs Island. My home turf, where I'm originally from. I grew up on the Potomac River in Northern Virginia, obviously Bugs Island, or as folks in North Carolina like to say, Carr Reservoir. Old school fish factory. Had a lot of BASS events and even some early FLW events there on that impoundment. But Powell Kemp, a local from there in North Carolina, took the crown. Man, went old school. Love to see this. It was neat to see how the conditions changed in that tournament. The water came up a lot. I say a lot, like 2.5, 3 feet over just a couple day period. And Powell Kemp able to roll some spinner baits, capitalize on some shad spawn. You saw a lot of folks flipping and pitching out there. David Williams had a really tough first day. David Williams, Bassmaster Elite Series angler, but man, he wrecked them on day 2 and 3, made it a really close event. So congratulations to Powell for punching that ticket to the Classic, and obviously David Williams for a great event out there. Just last week, John Cox, Guy is just insane with the sight fishing. Won the MLF Invitational at Lake of the Ozarks sight fishing. His high school childhood buddy Keith Carson finishes second. Marshall Robinson, MLF Bass Pro Tour angler son Marty Robinson, Marty's son Marshall, comes in third place there. Looked like he sight fished for a majority of the event. Later on in the show, in the showcase segment, we're going to talk to Grae Buck. Also had a great event. He just missed the cut, finishing in 11th place, but a solid finish. Now he's top 5 in the AOY. We're going to talk to Grae a little bit about that event and a little bit about his standing, where his thought process is, having a great year and going into these last couple of events on the MLF Invitational circuit. Alton Jones Jr. rocked it at the Heavy Hitters. This is a special event that MLF puts on for the Bass Pro Tour anglers. We're going to get into a little bit about how that works out, but in the championship round, 14's pretty good for a 5-fish limit, but what I talked about, Luke Palmer winning at Santee, but I'm going to say, Alton Jones, maybe the biggest domination ever, won by 60 pounds over Dakota Ebear. He won by 65 pounds over second place angler Andy Morgan. Man, I'm excited to hear more about this process that went down with Alton Jones Jr. He is going to be our featured angler in the spotlight segment of our show. We're going to talk to him about his winning lures, his winning ways, kind of his interesting mesh with this Heavy Hitters event. We'll talk about that more later. But that's going to be an exciting part of this episode for sure. Alton Jones Jr. being our featured angler. Always got to mention great info coming in from Jay Kumar. If you don't subscribe to the Bass Blaster, it's pretty much a must. You can do that real easily by sending an email to bassblaster@bassblaster.com, or simply just Google on the web, bassblaster.com. You can read all of those newsletters, but if you sign up, you're going to get it to your email box as soon as one comes out every time. One interesting thing that I saw recently in Jay's Bass Blaster article was down at Lake Okeechobee. They had a team tournament down there, and they had over 20 bags weighing 30 plus pounds. And there was another ridiculous amount of 20 plus pound bags. So that place is just on fire. I know a part of that is because the lake is fishing small. The fish don't have a whole lot of places to travel to because the vegetation there is a big concern. But man, if you want to catch some really big fish, and a lot of them, Okeechobee might be a place to look at going to. Just recently here in the last couple days, we'll have to dig a little bit more into this, but we had a disqualification at the Toledo Bend Bassmaster Open late last month, and it's really interesting what happened there. We got Keith Poche. We've had him on the episodes here just a couple shows ago, actually, and talking about his off the grid and how he's getting to some areas that are hard to get to by other boats, but completely within the rules. In this scenario, Bass felt like there was something that he accessed some water that was not tournament waters. It's an interesting story there. We're going to follow up on that a little bit, maybe talk about it a little bit more in our June 1 episode as more and more information comes out about that. But obviously, as we chat here on the podcast, you got the Lake Bassmaster Elite Series going on. Brandon Pollitt come out of the gate really quick on that one. And we've also got a Toyota Series, an MLF Toyota Series going on down there at Lake Eufaula in Alabama. Be interesting to see how that offshore bite kind of really starts to take off and just how things are progressing. Again, we've talked about it in some previous episodes, but talking about how patterns progress throughout the springtime. Now we're looking from spawn going into that post-spawn and soon to be, if not already, maybe down at Lake Eufaula, but some early summer patterns. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to break real quick just for a few minutes, and we're going to come back with Grae Buck in our showcase segment. Y'all stay tuned. Bass Edge Radio is going to be back in just a moment.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so choose the protection the pros pick. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our patented technology. The MegaWare Keel Guard is made tough and made to stick. Install it yourself in less than an hour, providing the most dependable, most trusted protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Insist on the original keel guard the pros have picked for 25 years. MegaWare Keel Guard. Nitro, a rush of tournament adrenaline. Nitro, the choice of champion, where performance meets play. Nitro, a big water beast, a pure fishing machine. Nitro, release the champion within.
Getting right back at it. Welcome back to the program. As you can see, welcome back to Bass Edge Radio. We're in our showcase segment. Excited to hear from this guy that's on your screen, MLF Invitational Pro, Grae Buck. Grae, thank you so much for being with us here on Bass Edge Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be part of the show again, and I must be doing something right if you want to have me on.
Absolutely, you're doing something right, for sure. I assume I can tell looks like you're in a garage. You're home in PA. And
yeah.
How's the bassing going on right now? Mid-March, Pennsylvania, or excuse me, mid-May, Pennsylvania. Give us a little update on what some of the fishing conditions are like there around your hometown.
You know what? I was just out on the water today. I've been running a couple guide trips now I have between the Lake of the Ozarks and the Potomac. I got probably 15 of them or so set up. So
okay.
We were out there today. The fishing's awesome. Right now, we got pre-spawners. We got fish that are on beds. We got ones that are just getting off. That water temp's right around 63 degrees. So it's a prime time to have everything going. It really is. It's a lot of fun. I had two gentlemen out today that were customers from last year that came with me. We caught a bunch of fish then, and we went out there and we caught a pile of them today. A lot of Ned rigging, kind of dragging along, fishing for those ones we couldn't quite see. And then as they were fishing up in the shallow stuff where the fish were probably spawning, I was dragging a jig out deep, and I caught a big old post-spawn girl. She was just over 5 pounds, which for Pennsylvania, that's a big one.
That is a big one. That's a great fish. And you've been catching a lot of good fish this year. Let's talk about this real quick. And you're off to a great start. You're sitting 4th place in the current Angler of the Year with the MLF Invitationals. Really, you're no stranger to doing well in the Angler of the Year standings. You've had a lot of years where you've been hovering either in that top 10 or just out of that top 10. Oftentimes there's some things that maybe some influences in your life or in your fishing that lead to this kind of positive momentum, or maybe we lean on a hot technique throughout a springtime. What do you feel like it is that you've got going for you this spring to be successful?
There was one thing I think that really got my season kicked off, started pretty strong, was I got to fish all winter this year. We did not have a cold year here in Pennsylvania. So even when the fishing wasn't at its best, where we're catching a lot of fish, but I was out there fishing 2-3 times a week still. And then before the first MLF Invitational in Okeechobee, I took my boat down early, kind of did a couple days of fishing, just kind of graphed around. And then my wife came down with me a week before Okeechobee. We just fished for a week, just having fun. I really feel like that got me. I wasn't as rusty as I had been in other years going into it. Because some years we get snow and our ice freezes all of our lakes over, and I can't get out. And this year I didn't have that. We had 50, 60 degree days through December and January.
Wow. So just kind of staying in tune before the season began, you feel like was a big key. Maybe hanging out, spending some time. Did the wife catch some big ones too?
Oh, yes. We caught 2 or 3 big ones down in Florida. We went and did a little of those exotic. We were catching those clown knife fish down in the Miami area. We were just having a good old time. It was just kind of hooking and casting and catching whatever we could.
That's awesome. Man, I'm no stranger to your social media. I saw just recently you posted a fish that Jessica caught, your wife. It had some amazing coloration to it. Did you get any clarity on is that the most colorful fish? I mean, it had a lot of black spots on almost. I would say the fish was almost like 70% black.
Yeah, there's one little lake near me that we fished just in the evenings when she gets done work. We can get over there for 2-3 hours before it gets dark. And that lake just has them. There's a lot of lakes that have that, I guess it's called melanosis. And there's black pigmentation. It's like almost camo looking, this fish. And I catch a lot of them out of there that have that. And they're always healthy, so I don't think there's any issue with it.
Right.
It's a neat little place, though. It kicks out. Like that one was, we didn't weigh it, but it was probably a 4.5 pounder. It was a good solid fish, and
it was a good fish, and it was very unique looking. If you haven't had a chance to go check out Gray Bucks Fishing's social, you have to do that. It was a cool deal. Man, let's dive back into this Lake of the Ozarks tournament. Kind of talked about it a little bit in the pre-show. You just missed the cut over there, but still had a great tournament. Finished 11th place. Most of the top anglers sight fished. You were one of the few guys that started off in that mid-teen range. I think you had 14 and 14, two 14-pound bags, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then you really jumped up there that last day to finish 11th with an 18-plus pound bag. One of the better bags, I would probably say, just fishing during the tournament and not sight fishing. Tell us how that kind of came about and how you progressed to do better throughout the event.
So what kind of happened in that event is everybody expected to be a full-blown spawn tournament. And they were definitely spawning. There's no doubt about that. Friday of the tournament, that's day 2. It was the full moon. So the fish should have been coming to us. And I did a lot of it in practice. I did a lot of the looking, searching, trying to find them. And I had, I don't know, maybe four pounders on beds and a handful of 3s and a bunch of just little 2s. And where I'm at in Pennsylvania, we don't have clear water. I can't sight fish. I thought I was going to go into this sucker and go sight fishing.
Right.
Day 1, I went out there. I started out trying to just fish, and I was throwing a jackhammer, chatterbait, just reeling along, catching what I could until the sun got up. The sun got up. I went to my first 3 beds. None of them are there. I catch 1 3-pounder on it off one of the beds I had marked. And I felt like I was almost wasting time, just kind of looking. I was like, had to keep going in between all these dock cables, and it's just not my comfort zone. So a lot of what I've been doing this year too, we were talking about momentum. I've also just been fishing what I'm confident in. And that's really helped, I think, catch more fish and bigger fish. And so that was what I did day 1. Day 2, I went the opposite direction. I went away from that clear water. I didn't want anything to do with it again. I fished a couple areas that I had got some bites in practice and caught what I did between those areas and then just running new water. So then on day 3, it was like, well, it kind of worked, and I was running out of spots that I had already fished. So I was like, oh, let's just go kind of run around, see what happens. The first area I pulled up in, I'm throwing that, I have it still tied on. It's that jackhammer. It's a green pumpkin one. It's got a razor shad on there. It's called Hot Snakes. It's got a little bit of chartreuse. Okay. And what these fish were doing, I was still fishing for bedding fish, but I wasn't physically looking at them. So I'm taking my jackhammer, throwing it up at these docks. They have a cable on either side, and then there's a walkway. There would be a bed on each cable and under the walkway. And it was really super patternable. Basically, you went into any creek arm that had a little pocket in it, and that little secondary point, from there back, those docks all had a fish on it. Wow. And it was a numbers game. You had to go catch 50 of them to get 7 that were solid keepers, but it was fun fishing. I don't know if you've ever been to Lake of the Ozarks, but it's got them.
I have been one time, and I was there with an MLF Selects event. So they're one of those no practice deals, just show up and go fishing, and caught a lot of fish. That place is jam loaded with bites, absolutely, and a lot of fun, but can be difficult bank fishing because, like you mentioned, a lot of docks, a lot of cables. There's a lot of that lot going on the bank there, so it's interesting how that turned out. But you had that kind of we rehashed this now from an episode a couple weeks ago, and that was basically you had a developing pattern going on, which is really cool. You were able to kind of shift from that sight fishing plan to this developing pattern that you had with the jackhammer. And man, it seems like every time, if you can fish freely and then run into a pattern that's working, it tends to be kind of lights out. Do you find that on a consistent basis?
Absolutely, because if you can get those bites, you have the confidence in yourself to keep running it throughout the whole lake. And then that's where it doesn't matter if you've ever fished in that section. It's almost better if you haven't, because then you're just kind of going through, I don't want to say going through the motions, but going through the rhythm of putting your bait where it needs to be. And like those cables would be 6 inches underneath the water. So you had to skip your jackhammer. Like it took a lot of like technique,
Patience. Yeah.
And patience. Because if you skip that wrong, or the wake from a big boat came by, it would skip your pattern bait right over top of the cable. And if that happened, there was one time that I hooked a fish over top of it where I just kind of kept fishing it anyway. I ended up losing it on the cable. I'm like, we're not doing that. So I just reel in quick after that and recast it, get back into your motion, what you had going on, and kind of keep going from there.
Very cool. Let's talk a little bit to our listeners up there in the Northeast, kind of or Mid-Atlantic area. You're kind of right in between those sections of the country. We always want to jump into fishing and either just fish to evolve a pattern, but you're always going to have some preconceived notions. You launch the boat, you check the water temperature, weather conditions. What are some patterns right now in that Mid-Atlantic, Northeast area of the country that you're looking to capitalize on as you go fishing over these next couple of weeks before you go off to your next event?
Yeah, pretty much in that Mid-Atlantic area, like the Potomac, Chesapeake, everything right in that area. We still got a lot of pre-spawn fish in this area. And then as you work your way up into the Northeast, getting into New York, they're all pretty much pre-spawn up there from what I've heard. I haven't been up yet, but I can't wait to get up there and go catch some of those big smallmouth. But it's fun. It's the time of year that these fish are the biggest. They're looking for a big meal. Couple of the baits, like I harp on this thing, but it's my confidence baits. What I throw everywhere I go. You get bites on it, you get big ones on it, and then you can always slow down. If you get into an area like this Buckeye ball and out jig, this sucker it's made me a lot of money this year. There's been 3 or 4 times this year where I catch one key fish in each tournament on it. And it's a little bit bigger of a profile, and it gets those big pre-spawn females that are staging, waiting to come up. They need a big meal to kind of get their eggs going and all that. And that's what they want to eat. And I'm just taking that out, dragging it along, maybe a rocky area or whatever. But it's a really good way to catch those fish.
I was going to ask you, what kind of cover this time of year with water temps in the kind of low, approaching mid-60s? Are you looking wood cover with a jig like that, rock cover, emergent grass, docks or that kind of thing? What do you feel like your confidence zone is with throwing a bait like that?
I want to be fishing right outside of the areas those fish are going to be spawning. So a lot of times if it's a lay down that's leading back into a cove, they're going to stop there. Those big females are going to stage there. You can flip it right around there. It's the same thing with like the Chesapeake or Potomac. Might be grass. It might be a lay down. It might be a dock. But I want to fish that stuff that's between like kind of the wintering areas where it's a main channel, a creek channel swing, whatever it is that holds this fish. And you want to intercept them, essentially. And what's cool about this is you catch those pre-spawners, but then a month later, you get those fish that are coming right back out to you, the post-spawners, and they go to the same areas. It's really predictable, and it makes it for a lot of fun this time of year.
So it sounds like you're looking for some depth transition areas. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that is fair to say.
Grae, it's interesting how your current area is really behind everything that you fished already this year. So you're kind of reliving what you've already done in most of your events. But, you've got 2 events left. You've got one there on the Potomac. You've got one up on the Mississippi River in Wisconsin. Mentally, how are you going to prepare for this? I know your ultimate goal is to qualify for that Bass Pro Tour. What do you see coming down the pike over the next 2 events or the last 2 events of the year?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the Potomac River. I fished down there a decent bit. I already went down and kind of scouted it out. I wanted to see how the grass was growing, where it was, where it wasn't, compared to 2 years ago when we fished a tournament there for the MLF Pro Circuit, I believe it was called at the time.
Right.
And I think it's going to be a lot of the same. Kind of just a matter of figuring out which grass beds are going to be having those fish that week. And I'm going to put myself in an area that I think gives me the best opportunity to catch numbers, because that's where you're going to get your bigger bites eventually. And being familiar with it. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, sounds like the same thing up in the Mississippi River. Is that something you see in river systems that if you just can get around a lot of bites, you'll eventually be able to cull up into a competitive stringer?
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot to do with just any grass fishery, to be honest with you. When you can get around a concentration, it's amazing how many fish live in that grass. So once you kind of key in those areas from practice, I'm going to probably, specifically the Potomac, I want to find 2 areas probably that I can really feel like I can hit it on a higher tide and a lower tide. I'm going to ride it throughout that. I'm not going to do the run and gun deal. It's a good way to catch a giant bag, but you get burn on it a lot too. So with where I'm at in the point standings, I have to be a little bit strategic, but I want to catch them at the Potomac. I'm not coming there trying to get a 50th place. I want to go in there and try to get that top 10, give myself a really good shot at making the Bass Pro Tour, where going into the Mississippi, there's not as much stressing going over it. There's still going to be some strategy to it, though, because that Mississippi River, the whole locking system, that's the wild card.
It can get you quick,
And I went up to 7 last time, and day 1, I only ended up landing 3 fish, and it burnt me. It hurt me bad. This day 2, I went up there, though, and I had a limit for like 14 pounds. It jumped me all the way back up into a check. So
nice.
If I can get to the point where I'm in good point standings, I'm staying in 8, and I'm going to figure it out there.
There you go. Man, it's been great having you on the program. I got to say, happy to see you doing well. And, man, great. Best of luck on these last couple of tournaments we're going to be watching.
Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate you having me, and we'll hopefully see you on the road here soon.
Absolutely.
Plenty of sunshine.
Come on, man. Let's roll. What the?
To catch the fish, you need to be one with the fish.
With PowerPole shallow water anchors, you'll get the ultimate in precision, power, and control, so you can catch more fish. No face paint or phony fins necessary.
Excessive shock and vibration are 2 leading causes for premature battery failure. Prolong the life of your batteries with the new MegaWare Battery Guard. The Battery Guard sits under your battery and absorbs excessive vibration and bounce, reducing G-shock by up to 80%. Great for boats or anywhere shock and vibration can damage a battery. The Battery Guard can easily be trimmed to fit virtually any custom shape or battery size. Save money by protecting your batteries. Spend more time on the water and less on maintenance. Find yours at megaware.com.
All right, y'all, we're back. Man, it's great to get into this feature angler spotlight. Man, just, one of the coolest things I have ever seen was this thing go down over there in Louisiana during the MLF special event, Heavy Hitters. Here is your champion with us right here on Bass Edge Radio, Alton Jones Jr. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the program.
Hey man, thank you. It's good to be here. And fun fact, you were actually the first podcast I ever did after I won the Open down on the Red River in like 2016. So it's come full circle. We're back.
Absolutely. Again. Well, that's great to hear. There's probably a lot of folks that were betting on Alton Jones Jr. being a pretty dang good bass fisherman. Obviously, where you came from, your father being pretty much a legend in the game, Bassmaster Classic champion. He's also a Heavy Hitters champion. He got that title before you also.
Right.
You got to stop following him. You got to step on out in front of him first, right?
I'm working on it, man. Those are some big shoes to fill. I definitely had a good teacher, though. It's making it in this sport's not an easy thing, but I had a first front row seat to a really good teacher and what it takes.
All kinds of front row seats to a lot of great anglers. I remember you used to travel with your dad everywhere for many, many years and be able to fish with him and practice with him and see the whole thing. But I tell you what, this Heavy Hitters event, man, I'm calling it the most dominant performance for sure in the last 10 years. Heck, maybe more, maybe ever. Man, and I know that there's another tournament out there where there was a wider gap of weight in this all, catch, count, and release format that MLF utilizes previously in a lot of their events, but now in just some of these special events. And we're going to get into that a little bit. But, man, as your lead grows and grows there at Bussey Brake in this Heavy Hitters Championship round, what's kind of going through your mind, and especially as you just keep getting bites?
Man, there were several times I kind of had to pinch myself. Against that crew, you never, ever feel safe. But it got to the point where I started to feel safe, and the day was going so well. And I'm like, this can't be real. This never happens. I mean, we're at a bush flipping lake, and we've got, guys like Andy Morgan in the field. You got Dakota Ebert in the field. Dakota's hotter than anybody on the planet right now. And so to have that day, like I keep telling people, those days are why I fish, not why I tournament fish, but why I fish. I mean, it didn't matter if I was fishing for $5 or $100,000. I was going to come off the lake grinning ear to ear, wanting to tell everybody about that day, because it was one, everybody that bass fishes has had that magical day, May have been on a pond, may have been on a small lake, may have been on Kentucky Lake. I don't know, but we all have that one day that we'll never forget. And that day on Bussey Brake was one for me. Getting the ball rolling, I just felt really dialed. I felt like I knew exactly the type of trees to look for, how high the fish were sitting in the water column, and I felt like I had something a little bit different, throwing that Geecrack bellow shad that just something they'd never seen before.
Yeah. Let's we kind of mentioned the father-son champion on the special heavy hitter event. That's a neat thing. A lot, some press out there about that. Weight-wise, interestingly enough, Michael Neal has the biggest weight gap ever, maybe in tournament bass fishing because of this all catch. But who was second place?
Yeah, I'm very familiar.
Alton Jones Jr. right out there on St. Clair. I think it was. I made a couple notes here, but man, it was like a 76-pound difference. But the difference in that is, he had 160 some pounds. You had 90 some pounds. In this particular event, you've got 81 pounds. Dakota Ebert finishes second place, has 22 pounds. Yeah. Andy Morgan, as you mentioned before, he had like 19 pounds. I mean, although the weight separation was different in that St. Clair event, the domination of what happened here in this heavy hitters was, it was just unbelievable. Let's talk about this white flipping bait. First, I want to know, if outside of bed fishing, how often do you flip a white colored bait? Just that color in general, not your everyday sight on somebody's fishing deck. Yeah,
so it's fairly rare. It's pretty situational. It's not something that I apply everywhere every day. But whenever there's a shad spawn, the fish are fresh, come off the beds, they're still shallow. A lot of times, you think shad spawn, we're talking spinner baits, buzz baits, lipless crankbaits, swim baits, you name it. But there are places, you look at Wheeler Lake, you look at Sam Rayburn, you look at Bussey Brake, where these shad spawns happen in bushes and just incredibly thick cover up in cypress trees and things like that. And it really limits what you can throw to mimic a shad, because everything else in the world gets hung up really bad. So flipping a white bait is something that I've adapted to when there's a shad spawn. Yet again, in the fall, when you get those shad migrations way back in the creeks, it's yet again very situational, not every lake. But there's times again when I'll pick up that white bait. I kind of learned that. I used to work with a company closely associated with Jason Christie. That's one of the things he did. He's one of those guys, when he speaks, I listen. And that's one of the nuances I kind of picked up from some of those Oklahoma boys. Biffle was known for it with his little tinfoil Biffle bug. So that's one of the things, growing up around the sport, having a front row seat, it's just one of the things to kind of pick up on and kind of put it into my own arsenal. But that's what they wanted that day for sure.
All right, that's a great explanation on the white bait scenario. Let's talk about the bait itself, the brand, the Geecrack bellows shad. That was your primary weapon. I'm not sure. You can let us know. Maybe you caught most of your fish that championship round to a certain extent. First, I'm going to talk about. I want you to tell us a little bit about the bellows shad, but before we dive into the bait itself, do you believe it was this domination? Do you believe it was the bait? Do you believe it was the area, the technique, your expertise, combination of all? What do you think really laid the groundwork for this championship day performance?
I think it was definitely a combination of all. Area played really, really big. I mean, getting the number of bites I did on that body of water doesn't happen very often. Clearly, you know, we had a front blowing in that day. We had some wind blowing across that berm that I was fishing, had the cypress trees up on top of it, you know, and that's the place is just a featureless bowl for the most part. You know, I think you get some current flowing over it, and it just stacks those fish up, puts them in a really predictable spot. And what you have with that wind too, you know, you've got willows and cypress trees. Those are your two types of bushes here. The willows, they all begin to shake with those waves and wind. I don't think the bass like it, so they go to look for a hard piece of cover. So any fish that were in those areas on other types of trees, I think they slid right on over to those cypress trees. So that was a nuance I picked up on. It's something I learned kind of from fishing all those days down in Amistad and Falcon and things. The Falcon especially, those big fish really don't like the bushy trees, you know, the green mesquites and stuff when the waves are big and the wind's thrashing them. That's when the days I tend to catch them off hardwood, if on wood at all. And then when it comes to the bait, I've got one right here. I've got the pack of bellow shads. I got a bad glare on them.
I can see a little bit. Yeah.
You know, I caught, to answer, I'm kind of jumping around. Grab me by the hair if you
sure.
Back in. But you know, I caught like all but 2 or 3 of my fish on it that day. I started off flipping it in those deep willows because the front hadn't quite hit yet. It was slick calm, and while these willows were 6-7 feet deep, the shad spawn was happening in the very top of them, and the bass were sitting in the very top of them. So I was flipping this thing on a 3/8 ounce weight. And while it doesn't look like much, you know, Geecrack's a JDM product, and really with all Japanese baits, it's about the subtleties, right?
Just lift it a little bit higher so we can get it. There you go. Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
This one's got a little bent tail. It's not supposed to because it's been watered up under my seat in my truck for a while. But you know, these ribs, you can see it looks like a bulky bait, but as I stretch it out here, you can see the body is incredibly slender. And so these ribs are just really to give the bait movement. And dude, when it doesn't look like much, but if you haven't thrown it, especially this white one, put it on a spinnerbait, put it on a chatterbait, or flip it on a heavy weight, something that's going to get a lot of water movement across those ribs, and watch how this thing swims. You know, when you look at what a shad does, it doesn't have a giant flapping tail. It doesn't have a boot tail like a swim bait. It's a really tight shimmy, and that's what this bait imitates perfectly. You know, I designed this bait when I got with Geecrack. I fell in love with Geecrack based off the bellows gill. My dad's a big sight fisherman. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I love this type of fish.
Right.
And so the bluegill profile of the bellows gill, which is almost this bait identical, it's just fatter. So we got a shad profile and a bluegill profile.
Okay.
You know, that's how I fell in love with the bait. I got in contact with Kazuki, who you know. We went fishing together, got to talking, ended up getting on the Geecrack team. And as time went on, I found myself actually trimming a bellows gill down into a more slender profile. Just because, you know, as we fish, generating bites, typically you want a little smaller profile.
Yep.
And so I was taking that bellows gill, I was just trimming it down, trying to keep a slender profile, shad-like profile, but just, and I noticed how good the bait moved when I trimmed it, and I said, well, why don't we just make this?
Right.
You know, I can remember I was on Lake Whitney with Kazuki whenever we started playing around with it and trimming it, and that there is the bellows shad. It was taking the bellows gill and making it a more versatile tournament applicable bait, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
Throwing it as a chatterbait, flipping, and it's still one of my favorite sight fishing baits. Last year at Heavy Hitters, I caught the biggest bass in the knockout round worth $50,000, the biggest bass in the championship round worth $100,000 on this exact bait. Not a white one, but a green pumpkin one.
Right.
And so I started off strictly flipping the bait. That's all I did in practice at Bussey Brake. Then we talked about the wind getting up, and I had.
Let me ask about that real quick. When the wind got up, so you went out there, you got a chance to scout the lake a little bit. prior to the championship round. And is that a deal where I know you're not launching your own boat because you're using MLF assigned boats for this particular special event, but do you see that the wind is blowing a particular direction and from a shad orientation that's going to be a high percentage target? Or was this stretch of bank that you dominated on just a place where you got some bites and multiple bites in practice?
It's really just a place where I got multiple bites in practice. If you ask most any bass angler, what's the most obvious thing in the lake that should hold a bass? It's the giant berm running all the way across the lake, leading out from the spawning flats. And I think it's one of those deals. It was a little almost too obvious. Guys. A lot of guys, including myself, we all started kind of in the general area. Bussey has several. It's got like 3 or 4 key areas, and the rest, it's kind of like Okeechobee, but a very small version of it. Gotcha. The rest is kind of dead water to me. And a lot of guys started where the whole tournament went down last time when we were there last year in February. But as that wind started to pick up, I made the swap over to the cypress trees, and that's when I picked up the spinnerbait. Now, this is not the exact spinnerbait. I had 3 of them that day, and I broke every single one of them because I caught so many bass on it. This is literally just one I pulled out of my garage. So my first couple fish, like 2 or 3 of them that I caught on a spinnerbait around those cypress trees, I saw the wind blowing. I didn't have a trailer. I was just throwing a plain half-ounce spinnerbait, right? Okay. But I'm a big believer, whether it's spinnerbaits, buzzbaits, chatterbaits, in throwing some type of a trailer on it, because a lot of these windows that I'm hitting under these lanes and these cypress trees are really small, and just slinging around a half-ounce spinnerbait is incredibly difficult to be accurate with. You're going to hang it up. It's not going to skip at all. Right. And so throwing this thing right here on it as a giant trailer, because it is a big trailer for a spinnerbait. I really don't see anybody throw a trailer quite that big. Adds a lot of bulk. You've got a good flat side to skip the bait. And then yet again, if you don't believe me, go try a pack. The way this thing moves with the bait is really incredible. And I talked earlier about how high the fish were sitting in the water column. Yes. With a trailer this big and this bulky, you can keep that bait extremely high in the water column at very slow speeds. Right. And I think that's a really big key to just keeping your bait in the strike zone longer. Generally fairly muddy. I don't think the fish are coming from a long ways to get it. So reeling something really slow, staying in that strike zone just another second or 2 was really, really key for me. Most of the bites I was getting were borderline topwater bites. I'd pull it over a limb and I'd see the fish come up and, roll on the blades. So wow. Something a lot of people don't think about when it comes to throwing a spinnerbait is the size of the trailer and what that does, not just in profile, but like how you fish the bait. Right. And so
speed, you're talking about speed, where it goes to water column
and water column. If I'm wanting to fish a 1 ounce spinnerbait, say with a giant number 6 Colorado, and be able to fish it slower and shallower, get that thump, that's when, I'm going to want a big trailer. Now, if I'm going to want to get that bait 10 feet deep, I wouldn't recommend the bellow shad as a trailer. It's just too big. It's going to make the bait want to ride up. But those are the little nuances that I think can separate you from having a mediocre day to a really, really good day if you just kind of keying in on those little subtleties.
Yeah. I think that's also, I'll add, great point about throwing a spinnerbait, and you could take that to a bladed jig as well.
Absolutely.
Any of those styles of lures, people don't, understand what you just explained to them so eloquently that trailer just plays a huge role in the depth and action, water column, speed of retrieve, all those things that help a fish react. Let's jump into this Geecrack thing real quick a little bit. It's funny, as you mentioned, I know Kazuki Kitajima. He's the USA representative with Geecrack, and I knew, I kind of had an idea. You never know, right? But I had an idea. We had Kazuki here on Bass Edge Radio probably about 18 months ago, maybe 12, 18 months ago. But I kind of figured with the innovation that this company was coming out with lure design, that it was going to be popular and, could be highly effective. You've been most effective with it, Alton, from a national standpoint. It's been great to see. But let's talk about their products a little bit. what are some of the confidence baits? You talked about changing the bellows gill, slendering it down to the bellows shad to be more tournament friendly. Not that the other baits aren't. They are. They got a lot of great stuff. But what are some of the baits from Geecrack that you rely on, that you feel like folks need to maybe take a peek at this brand? Because quite frankly, there's more people using it today than there was 2 weeks ago. But there's not a whole lot of people with this brand in their boat.
Yeah. So I went from being the only thing JDM I had in my boat was maybe a Megabass 110 to, like, if you go look through my tackle box, you're not going to think I'm an American angler. Like, I've gone so far down that JDM rabbit hole thanks to Geecrack, which is a good and a bad thing if you look at my tackle orders. But seeing how these guys in Japan develop and innovate, they're fishing incredibly clear water. They don't have a lot of bodies of water with bass, extremely high pressure, and it's always, they're always innovating something just a little bit before we do, and it comes over. And sometimes, like what we just did with the shad from the gill, it needs to be Americanized just a little bit based on the forage that we have over here. It's a little different, but their attention to detail is just beyond anything that you're going to see mass produced here in the States. Talking about baits that I love, the whole bellows line. We've got the bellows shad, the bellows gill, the bellows crawl, the bellows stick. They all have the ribbed body, a very similar lifelike action. It's not a loud action. It's not going to be your rage tail or anything like that, a very loud action, but it's little subtleties. And what I've seen nowadays in the world of forward-facing sonar, where all bass are getting pressure. There's no such thing as they go offshore and are left alone. Those little subtleties have been what really triggers a lot of strikes. And when I look at a bait that I really don't even want to talk about, but has just opened my mind. If I look at one bait that has opened my mind to what Geecrack is capable of, and all the the JDM world of bass fishing, is the Emo Kamushi. Are you familiar with the Emo Kamushi?
No. Tell me about it.
Okay. So the Emo Kamushi, for those that don't know what it is, we're all familiar with the cover scat, that poop bait.
Yeah.
That we've seen some guys catch them on. It's in that same family. So they've got one called an Emo Ripper at Geecrack, and it is just your standard. It looks like a fat Senko with a tail. It's about yay big around and about 3.5 inches long. I think it's 95 millimeters is how they gauge it. And you fish it weightless. You fish it. It's an extremely high content with a SAF material at Geecrack, and it's got a rate of fall of probably a foot to a foot and a half a second. And they fish it offshore. They fish it deep grass lines, deep rock piles, and they fish it some really unique ways. But the Emo Kamushi is one of those baits. So take the same bait, the Emo Ripper, and you thread jig skirt material all throughout it. So it's like a hairy turd, right? For lack of a better word.
That's cool.
I look at this thing the first time and I'm like, this isn't going to catch a bass. What is that supposed to be? And then not too long down the road, Shin Fukai has like a top 3 finish at Chickamauga throwing a cover scat. And I'm like, maybe I ought to look into this Emo Ripper and Emo Kamushi and see what it's all about.
Right.
Almost everything that I've ever looked at in the world of bass fishing said that's dumb. It's not going to catch a bass. Somebody wins $100,000 on it very shortly after.
Right.
And it makes me feel dumb. So this Emo Kamushi, you fish it the same way, heavyweight, or you fish it weightless because of the heavyweight salt content of the bait.
I like to call these things gravity baits. I don't even know where I came up with that term.
That's pretty good. I like it.
Yeah, I call them gravity baits because they're heavier than normal plastics. And, it's not that they fall super fast. But
not fast at all. But fast enough where you can fish it weightless in deep water.
And you could fish it on 15, 20-pound tests.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily a finesse technique.
Yeah, and so I kind of branched out and started doing that. Went to Cayuga, which we're going to again this year, fishing some deeper water, 17, 20 feet. Started catching fish on a crankbait and a drop shot, finding some big schools of fish, right? And I can remember one day live scoping out there, and I had one tied on, kind of for kicks, right? And I threw this thing out there, and I'm watching it go down. And it gets about 10 foot over this fish's head, and sure enough, here comes on lot 4 fish. So I'm like, yeah, right. By the time, boom, my line jumped, and I'm like, no way. I said, it's 5-pounder. And I'm like, that was just an aggressive fish. It was a fluke. I bombed that sucker right back out there, catch a 3.5. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was able to take that bait right there for largemouth and fish places. I mean, these fish were getting a lot of pressure.
Right.
Most of the field was fishing in one area. Everybody's fishing a drop shot. Some guys are catching them on a crankbait, but finesse tactics were dominating that event. And I rode it to like a top 15 finish, and really fishing deep offshore summertime is my weakness. So for me to be able to ride it to a top 15 finish says something about that bait.
It works really well.
Right. Yeah. And while guys are fishing 6-pound tests and working really hard for these bites, I can go for 17-pound line, a bait caster, and catch these largemouth. And honestly, we were fishing every fish counts at that time. We've gone to a 5-fish. Had it been a 5-fish format, I would have ridden it to a lot higher in the top 15. I wasn't getting quite as many bites as some guys, but my quality throwing that bigger profile bait was much better. And I'll add in one more for a long story. I took this same bait to Mille Lacs.
Okay.
Absolutely smashed the big smallmouth on it.
Wow.
Fishing some isolated boulders that had 5-10 fish on them. I'd fish a drop shot on them for like 10 minutes. And I'd watch them on forward-facing sonar, swimming around my bait, doing all the other stuff. I'd throw that kamushi out there. It'd get about 5 foot around the boulder, and all of a sudden they're curious creatures. And sure enough, the biggest one in the group would come eat it. It was incredible. I can't wait. We did with the billow shad. We put it on the map this week. We sold a lot of them. They're all the white ones anyway are sold out on everywhere you can look at them. But I can't wait to do it with the Emo Kamushi because it will get that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that technique, that style of bait, certainly probably the next big thing coming from Japan. You can talk about the drop shot and a lot of different techniques, but I really feel like they are ahead of the game, as they often are in an engineering standpoint, but they're kind of ahead of that deal, and that's going to see some stuff. We had an episode with Kenta Kimura. Kenta knows it and talked a lot about that on the program as well. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, please do, with Kenta Kimura. Just maybe it was around the beginning of the year.
I will, because I follow him on all his social channels, and every picture he posts, I'm zooming in as tight as I can to see what he's throwing. And then usually I'm calling Kazuki and be like, "Hey, do you see this little nail weight he's got in here? What is this? Where can I get it?" And Kazuki's like, "You can only get it in Japan." And I'm like, "Well, I need it."
Before we leave Geecrack, I don't want to make this a Geecrack. There's a lot of great things to talk about Geecrack, but I definitely don't want to make this like over Geecrack. That was the winning bait. So,
it was. I mean, there's no way around it.
So you talked briefly or mentioned an SAF material, and I know I need some insight from you. You probably have more understanding of this brand than I do, but dude, the plastic smells like Fritos. What is going on with the smell of the bait? I can smell
them right now. Some people say it smells bad. Other people say it smells good.
I don't think it smells bad, but
I don't. So people say it smells bad, and then I'm like, close your eyes and say, like, pretend it's a bag of chips, and they're like, oh, that's not bad. I think they're just taken back by the fact that a bag of lure smells like that. Don't ask me what all is in the SAF material. I'm not a scientist. I know there's some like MSG, amino acids, basically things we eat in a lot of foods we eat, and that's cool. Getting that smell. Some of those preservatives, but the SAF material is just what they use for their plastic. There's different variations of the SAF material. Like this one right here is 40%. Some of those Emo Kamushi, those heavier salt content bait have a higher percent, increasing your rate of fall. So yeah, it's just
very unique.
Is their deal.
All right, cool, very unique. All right, let's get into a little bit of personal stuff. Practice outside. You go to these events. You've got several events throughout the year. You qualify for Red Crest Heavy Hitters. You're on the road quite a bit. First, I got to say congratulations. I know you got a newborn.
Yeah, we've got one
fairly new.
Turned 1 month today. So it's pretty new, and that's getting the majority of my time and attention right now. I'm about to head to Gunnersville But man, it's just I can't hardly make myself do tackle right now, and just because I just missed the 10 days of the first month of his life, so I'm trying to spend as much time with him as I can and really soak it all up, because it's crazy. I know he's only a month old, but he's growing so fast. Do
you chalk up the Heavy Hitters win partially to the baby pattern?
100%.
I mean, that is a thing in bass fishing.
It's 10% Geecrack, 90% baby pattern.
That's awesome. All right, I love that. It used to be a big thing in like the mid to late 2000s, on the Elite Series. It was one of those things where it was like, oh, this person's, their wife's pregnant. They're gonna win the tournament, and then they win. It was
we're bringing the baby pattern back.
There you go. I like it. Do you do a lot of fishing around the house when you're off at tournaments? You jump out there with the guys and gals doing the weekend or the weeknighters, the Thursday nighter or the Wednesday nighter or anything like that?
I have in the past. I really don't fish as much at home now, just because I spend so much time on the road, and when I'm not at a tournament, when I do spend time on the water, it's content building, either for sponsors, for my own YouTube channel, all social media channels. So I really don't get the opportunity to fun fish. The closest days I get, I take that, I get a day or two here and there to go fish with my dad, go fish with some of my old team partners.
Right.
But the closest thing I get to fun fishing is I take some charity trips to some special private lakes, where it's just as much a fun trip for me as it is for the people paying for the trip. But,
it's a catch fest,
right? It's a catch fest. I don't fish locally tournament wise around here. Mostly because I don't put my time in. I don't care how good you are. If you're not putting your time in, I'm going to get smoked by these dudes fishing the Wednesday nighter that are fishing 2 to 3 days a week out on these bodies of water, and have been for the past 6 months. And so if I'm not investing my time, I'm not going to invest my money. My ego is too big. I'm not just going to go donate. But because there's a lot of good sticks in all these jackpotters. You go fish all across the country.
That's a great point. Time is so important. How do you deal with that? A lot of these lakes, they kind of get into the national tournament rotation.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a lot of same places, but when you get new tournaments tournaments on new lakes,
mm-hmm.
do you generally like to get out there and take a peek at these places for 5, 6,
mm-hmm.
7 days and really kind of get a feel for them if they're going to become a national stop on a regular basis?
I would never say I spent 5, 6, 7 days, mostly because when we go pre-practice as professionals, we don't go fish, right? Mm-hmm. I'm doing a lot of graphing. I want to see as much of that body of water as I can. And usually 2 to 3 days, even if we're talking a 50, 60,000 acre lake, if I'm doing my work, right, that's not fun. If I'm doing my work and staring at that graph, running my mercury motor all across the lake, I can see a lot, break down a lot in a short amount of time. And, we're a month, 2 months out a lot of times when I'm riding around. So doing fishing, finding fish that day is not important. I'm trying to get a vibe for the lake, see if there's grass in certain areas, maybe mark a few brush piles, rock piles, things like that. But I'm trying to think ahead on where these fish are going to be, and really just trying to get a lay for the lake. But I love when we go to new bodies of water, because that's where you can start to get an advantage. Like, that's where you can outwork people. When we go to places like we're about to go to Gunnersville right now.
You've been there like 20 times?
I believe it or not, I've never fished a professional level tournament there. I've been there quite a few times.
Are you serious?
But you've got a lot of these other guys in the field. It'd be hard to outwork them. They've got 100 competition days on this body of water. So it's really hard to get a leg up. But, when we go to these new bodies of water, your Caney, Bussey Brake, Darbone, out in Raleigh, those are the kind of places where put that extra work in, put that extra time in, really give yourself an upper hand.
All right, cool. I'm gonna take one more question from you, then we let you go. Get ready for Gunnersville, and you probably got some chores there around the house before you go.
I've got a long list.
You got to give the baby love too, right?
That's right.
So last question: summertime, it's approaching, right? Mm-hmm. We're here in the middle of May. Down south, things moving past that shad spawn, getting into kind of that early summer period. How do you like to go about looking for a pattern this time of year? Are you Sounded earlier in the interview, you kind of, not that you don't mind going out deep, but you kind of focus more on that shallower section of the lake. Tell us about how you like to catch them this time of year and what you're looking for Alton Jones Jr. to have some immediate success.
Yeah, so one of the things, like when it comes to this time of year, you got to look at, are you fishing a reservoir or are you fishing a river system, right? Like if you're in the Tennessee River, fish are going to tend to move out a lot quicker and in bigger numbers, and they're going to get in these huge schools, right? I mean, it's not so much cover oriented, right? They're not sitting behind a stump. They're not sitting on a brush pile. So you're looking for different things. There you're actually side scanning for actual schools of fish, right? They're sitting tight on the bottom. Typically those river bars are hard bottom where you can see them. You come over into Texas, Oklahoma, even up into the Ozarks, most of these lakes, they're reservoirs. They don't have current. When fish go offshore, they don't do it in these massive schools. There's not current to position these fish by the thousands like there are. So a lot of times there you're looking more for cover. And it tends to be like, really honestly, if I'm talking around here, which is where I have the most expertise, offshore here is not 20 feet deep. A lot of times it's 7 to 12. All of the big ones I've ever caught offshore, when I'm talking around my home, on the dirtier impoundments, there's a few crystal clear places that are outliers, but on the dirtier water lakes where you're fishing that green fishable water, 15 feet is really as deep as I'm going to fish, and I'm going to focus on structure, right? I'm focusing on cover, be it a bridge, a roadbed, a brush pile. I mean, you can't go wrong with a brush pile. And really trying to focus on some of that shallower stuff. And I think that's where you can get a little bit sneakier with it. So if I'm an angler trying to separate myself as these fish start to move out offshore, people tend to try to get ahead of the fish. They try to go deeper than the fish want to be. I think if you take the time, graph a little shallower, and I'm talking for guys that are fishing reservoirs here, and look for that sneakier brush piles, some of those sneakier house foundations in 15 foot and less. I'd say 10 foot and less is even better. You might set yourself apart, have some fish that aren't going to get as pressured, and I think you're going to have a potential to catch an even bigger fish than some of those guys fishing out deep. I
like it. Great tips. Great approach, especially for, like I say, I feel like you're that shallow water. That's kind of your true love, and is it not?
It is. I feel like I try to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. If I had to pick a specialty, it's sight fishing. But yeah, I do. I feel more confident in shallow water. But in the world of forward-facing sonar, I think if you can master that, you can get good at deep water really, really fast. And so I've gotten a lot more comfortable over the past 5-6 years as we've watched Panoptics go to LiveScope to LiveScope Plus. I've kind of rode that wave all the way through, but I find myself more at home in 5 foot and less.
There you go. Great word for it. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we let you go, Alton?
Man, no, I'm really looking forward to Lake Guntersville. This is my survive and advance type lake. I'm having a pretty good season, but this is the one where I circle it and I'm like, keep the wheels on the tracks right here. This is where if I can somehow have a good event here, we'll be in a real good place. But I just want to say thanks for having me on. Hopefully we get to do it again sooner than 2016 to 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again. We'll have to see if we can't get them to make those special events as another points event that you can substitute for a poor event.
Right. Yeah, no, I would love that because the heavy hitters events have been good to me the past couple of years.
I mean, it's been good to your bank account, no doubt. 150 absolutely. Plus last year, and you won this year. It's been that's a great tournament, and man, congratulations. Well done. Good luck the rest of the season. Go do what you got to do. Thank you for being right here on Bass Edge Radio.
Nitro, a rush of tournament adrenaline. Nitro, the choice of champion, where performance meets play. Nitro, a big water beast,
A pure fishing machine. Nitro. Release the champion within.
Nobody wants to run out of power when they're on the water. There is a better way. Introducing the Charge Marine Power Management Station from PowerPole that does the work of 3 devices: a traditional battery charger, a charge on the run, and an emergency start system. PowerPole Charge.
All right, here we are back at Bass Edge Radio. Man, got a few final thoughts. It's been an awesome show. Obviously, a Grae buck coming on in that showcase segment. Grae had some really neat things to say. I go back to something we mentioned a few episodes ago, and that was a developing pattern was his key to success over there at Lake of the Ozarks. So really neat to see how kind of that developed for him, but also just throughout the springtime, it seems like he's been relying on just a couple of techniques. He's been able to make those work through the fisheries that he's been to. A lot of those fisheries have been pre-spawn, and picking up that jig and throwing that vibrating jig as well has been some key things for him. You can see as when he talks about those baits that they just kind of resonate with what he's been doing this year and how he's been able to put some better quality fish in the boat. It's got him 4th place in the MLF Invitational standings. So good. It's gonna be fun to see if he can keep that rolling on 2 river systems, which the Potomac River and obviously the Mississippi River up there in La Crosse, to see if he can punch that ticket to the Bass Pro Tour. I mean, jumping back into our segment that we just left with Alton Jones Jr., I thought maybe the most interesting part of the whole interview, although the Geecrack thing was really cool, having sneaky bait, maybe along with, he talked about sneaky spots, part of his success, kind of that mid-depth zone that he likes to target in this early summer time frame when those fish are moving out, kind of jumping on those bass that aren't yet obviously into the mid-summer to late summer mood, where they get a little bit lethargic, but capitalizing on some of those big fish in that mid-depth zone. But really, he doesn't fish a whole lot at home because time on the water. Makes perfect sense, right? That time on the water is key to being successful. But even a seasoned professional that's had the success that Alton Jones Jr. has had, he understands the meaning of time on the water and what it means to having success at the local level, a level that I know a lot of Bass Edge Nation is fishing. And, understanding that the home lake or those 2 or 3 lakes that might be within an hour or so drive of your home is so important to be successful. But the way that you be successful on those impoundments is by spending a lot of time on those impoundments and really staying up with seasonal behavior patterns, movements of the fish, and kind of where they're headed. Even Alton Jones Jr. is leery of tossing his money into a hometown derby. So that was interesting to hear. Tell you what, we've got some good events coming up. Again, Alton talked about the MLF coming up at Lake Gunnersville. The Bass Pro Tour event's going to be starting May 16th. We've got the Bassmaster Opens going on May 18th at Wheeler Lake. That race is starting to heat up a little bit. They're through 3 events of the 9 EQ events. A cool race to watch going on there. There's a lot of movement after that Bugs Island event. And the final, I believe it's the Southwest Division, they call it, which is basically the Texas division of the MLF Toyota Series, starting March 18th over there at Lake Sam Rayburn. There's going to be some guys punching their ticket to the Toyota Championship, which is going to happen in November at Table Rock Lake. Want to remind everybody, in celebration of our 400th podcast, we're going to be doing a giveaway. You've got the opportunity to win this bad boy right here, or actually 5 of these guys. This is $125 worth of Midway USA gift cards. That's 5 $25 gift cards. All you need to do is like and comment on this episode. Of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel so y'all get after it. Good luck in winning $125 worth of gift cards from Midway USA. Thanks again, MLF Invitational Pro Grae Buck, Heavy Hitters Champion, Alton Jones Jr. Be sure to tune back in with us here at Bass Edge. The next episode is going to happen on June 1. We're going to have 2 more great guests to help us out, all become better anglers. I gotta mention that Bass Pro Shops, big part of a big part of Bass Edge, and their support here means a whole lot. Bass Pro Shops always want you to remember that there's someone down. Everybody lives downstream. So Bass Pro Shops, appreciate them. As mentioned in several shows, Bass Edge podcast available on YouTube through Bass Edge's continuing on audio podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, many others. Don't forget, you can keep up with that programming through all of those streaming providers. MegaWare Keel Guard, developer of the industry's first do-it-yourself keel protector. Protect yourself from grinding sand, abrasive rocks, concrete boat ramps, along with Nitro Performance bass boats, Power Pole, and Mercury Marine. Y'all take care. We will see you next time from Bass Edge Radio.